capabilities of the United Nations would be sufficiently strong and the obligations of all states under such an arrangement sufficiently far-reaching as to assure peace and a just settlement of differences in a disarmed world. They're going to use the United Nations to keep the peace. In other words, a world government, which is exactly what Daniel talked about and Jesus talked about, and it is very deadly. During stage 2, states will develop further the peacekeeping processes of the United Nations to the end that the United Nations can effectively suppress any threat or use of force by anyone, and that would include the American people. It's going to be omnipresent, and it's going to be omnipotent in its ability to handle. And this is what Revelation says, who can make war with the beast? Remember that the U.S. and Russia are to have their internal or militaries turned over to the United Nations in this 3-stage process, and we end up with a UN in total control of the world. A global entity, precisely as Daniel and Revelation talk about. It's and Jeremiah and Isaiah refer to it as, of course, Babylon. And this process, of course, emerges bringing out the United Nations as the final end-time global ruling entity, which the Bible refers to as the apparatus of the Antichrist, or we could say the Antichrist system. And that is why it sits in New York City, the big city. On the wall in the Security Council is a phoenix. That picture you're looking at right there is in reality the phoenix bird, which is to grow up out of the old world order. America is to be patrolled by Russian, Belgian, Irish, and Colombian and Venezuelan troops under this plan. UN troops are already on U.S. soil, and it won't be very long before these sites that you're seeing right here are going to be very commonplace in the United States. And if the American citizens resist, they are simply going to be liquidated according to the Bible. This power will come to pass. They've laid their plans well, and God has ordained it and allowed it, and is allowing it to happen. And so it's, in reality, here in America, it's a judgment against the United States. There are many books written about a United Nations peace force, so this is not anything we're making up. They come in under the UN Charter. And the last part of it, this principle of non-interfering in a nation shall not prejudice the application of enforcement measures under Chapter 7. In other words, the United Nations claims that it doesn't really want to get involved in internal national affairs, but the opposite is in reality the truth. Chapter 7 deals with action with respect to threats of the peace, breaches of the peace, or acts of aggression. And it's the Security Council itself that determines the existence of a threat, breach, or act of aggression. And it can even walk in under the threat, or it's a possibility that we might have problems. And they determine the existence of any threat to the peace. So they can come in, if they choose to, on very fragile grounds, which is exactly what they did in Somalia. Should the Security Council consider that measures provided in 41, which are more economic, I don't know exactly what word to use, but sanctions, I guess, is the best word to cover it. If that doesn't work, if economic sanctions do not work, then they can resort to military powers. And they can use whatever they have to maintain or restore international peace. Now, Psalm 2 says that the kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. Where do the rulers of the world meet? They meet at the United Nations, and this is where they take their counsel together. And the United Nations is, according to the Bible, anti-Christ, anti-God to its very core. It is, in fact, the substitute for God and Christ on planet Earth. They intend to take it for themselves. The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and shall break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings. Now, it's a diverse kingdom. The United Nations is not a kingdom, and it's not a nation. It exists solely by treaty power, by an arrangement of nations itself. Excuse me. The United Nations is to be brought up to full global power with an army so powerful that none can fight against it. That's the entire plan, and that is exactly what the Bible talks about for the end times. It will also break into pieces the entire world, and that's done under Article 52, which deals with regionalism, which is in fact breaking the world into pieces. And this is how they do it. They actually subdivide the world into 10 regions. That came out of the Club of Rome, and here are the regions on the TV screen. Region 1, of course, is North America, and it's Region 1 by virtue of the fact that North America, and particularly the United States, is the primary power behind the United Nations, enabling this to happen. The United States itself is broken down into 10 federal regions. We have global regions, and now we have national regions. And in our country, they are simply called federal regions. And we're moving, in effect, from elected officials to appointed officials to non-elected bureaucrats who are appointed. Now, each region has different states in it, and the number of states varies with each particular region. Then each state is subdivided up into its particular regions. Many times it falls along county lines, many times it doesn't. Overlapping all of it is, of course, grids that keep getting smaller and smaller, which is the reason why thousands or millions, actually, of Americans are getting address changes. They're going under the United Nations grid system, which divides the world into tiny pieces, which is exactly what Daniel said. They can get it right down to your house number. In fact, they can get it down to about 10 square yards of turf.
Recently, NASA's Landsat 4 satellite, shown here just before its trip into space, was launched from the Western Test Range by a Delta rocket. This Landsat is the fourth in a series of NASA spacecraft designed to continuously collect accurate information on Earth's resources. More than 100 nations will make use of the information gathered by Landsat 4 in land use planning, mineral exploration, and agriculture. Landsat project scientist Dr. Vincent Solomonson described a new instrument on the satellite called the thematic mapper.
In urban planning, the thematic mapper will be very effective. Features that were blurred or hazy over cities as viewed by the multispectral scanner on Landsats 1 through 3 will be seen much more clearly from the thematic mapper. And as a result, urban planners will be able to manage and monitor the spread of the urban sprawl into the surrounding countryside.
The major receiving and processing facility for Landsat data is located at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. After completing its 3-year mission, Landsat 4 is designed to be retrieved by the space shuttle.
Okay, standing by for up telemetry command reset.
So what we have are 10 federal regions. We have 10 federal regional councils, which are miniature Washingtons in each federal capital. We're being regionalized, and pretty soon there won't be any such things as counties or states. So what we're doing is we're going from county and state control to total federal control, and then the federal government's losing its control to the United Nations. This is globalism. This leads to the federalization of our police or the security forces within the United States. And this is really in total violation of the constitutional implications. But they're not paying any attention to the Constitution. The internal security forces are not your peacekeeping, UN peacekeeping troops.